My life had been a poem I would have writ, but I could not both live and utter it. Thus said Henry David Thoreau.
Did he also say, love is the wind, the tide, the waves, the sunshine. Its power is incalculable. It can move the globe without a resting place. To that poem, to that love, my fellow citizens, I dedicate this tribute. On the morning of May 6, 1862, Henry David Thoreau, his limbs too weak to carry his body aright, but his intellect as bright and his wit intact as ever, was brought down to the parlor of his family home. Among those present were his younger sister, Sophia Thoreau, and his maternal aunt, Louisa Dunbar.
Would you like to sit up, my brother? Are you feeling well this morning?
Thank you, Sophia. I have been sick so long that I've almost forgotten what it is to be well. Sophia, it is the fashion to leave an estate behind. I leave these pine boxes, my journals, in your hands. Be careful when you carry them. They are more substantial than their fame.
Oh, Henry, stop joking, please. The trouts are back at the cove from their morning swim and they're waiting for you. Get well soon.
Tell them to get dressed up for a new school.
Oh, Henry, I'm sure they will have a laugh. Have you made your peace with God, my child?
I did not know that we had ever quarreled.
Oh, we love you, Henry.
Now comes good sailing. Moose, Indian.
No shadow of gloom attaches to anything connected with my precious brother. His whole life impresses me as a grand miracle. I always thought him the most upright man I ever knew. Now it is a pleasure to praise him.
With those trailing words, now comes good sailing. Moose, Indian, Henry David Thoreau embarked upon his last excursion, this time onto the stream of eternity. He was 44 years old. A farmer and a believer in the laws of nature, Thoreau had faith in the seed. And his words, over 2 million of them in his unpublished journals alone, are the seeds that he left in his estate. Seeds sure to find good ground and bring forth fruit 7-fold, even 70-fold, so long as the fountains of truth and beauty, freedom and justice have not deserted the earth. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, assembled here at the First Parish Church for this solemn service in tribute to the proud son of Concord, Mr. Henry David Thoreau. He entered eternal life on May 6, 1862. The poet, Mr. William Ellery Channing, will now present a hymn that he prepared for this occasion.
Complain, how faint the sun sunbeams light the shore. His heart more fixed than earth or main, Henry, that faithful heart is o'er. Oh, weep not thou thus fast a soul. Oh, do not mourn this lordly man, as long as Walden's waters roll, and Concord River fills the span. For thoughtful minds in Henry's page large welcome find and bless his verse, drawn from the poet's heritage, from wells of right and nature's source. Fountains of hope and faith inspire most stricken hearts to lift this cross. His perfect trust shall keep the fire, his glorious peace disarm all loss.
Mr. Ralph Waldo Emerson will now share his memories of our beloved Henry.
There is a flower which grows in the most inaccessible cliffs of the Tyrolese mountains, where the chamois dare hardly venture, and which the hunter, tempted by its beauty and by his love, for it is immensely valued by the Swiss maidens, climbs the cliffs to gather, and is sometimes found dead at the foot with the flower in his hand. We know it as the flower everlasting. The Swiss call it Edelweiss, which signifies noble purity. Henry David Thoreau seemed to me living in the hope to gather this plant, which belonged to him of right. The scale on which his studies proceeded was so large as to require longevity, and we were the less prepared for his sudden disappearance. My fellow citizens of Concord, the country knows not yet, or in the least part, how great a son it has lost. Henry David Thoreau was born in Concord, Massachusetts on the 12th of July, 1817. He was bred to no profession. He never married. He never went to church. He never voted. He refused to pay a tax to the state. He ate no flesh. He drank no wine. He never knew the use of tobacco. And though a naturalist, he used neither trap nor gun. It was a pleasure and a privilege to walk with him. There was a wonderful fitness of body and mind in him. He knew the country like a fox or a bird and passed through it as freely as by paths of his own. Birds alighted on his shoulders. The fishes swam into his hands, and he took the foxes under his protection from the hunters. He could not bear to hear the sound of his own steps, the grit of gravel, and therefore never willingly walked in the road, but in the grass, on mountains, and in woods. He thought the scent more oracular and trustworthy than sight, and he honored the pure fragrance of the white water lily. He delighted in echoes and said they were almost the only kind of kindred voices that he heard. The axe was always destroying his forest. Thank God, he said, they cannot cut down the clouds. He knew the worth of the imagination for the uplifting and consolation of human life, and liked to throw every thought into a symbol. The fact you tell is of no value, but only the impression. And for this reason, his presence was poetic. Thoreau was sincerity itself, and might fortify the convictions of the prophets in the ethical laws by his holy living. I have repeatedly known young men of sensibility converted in a moment to the belief that this was the man they were in search of, the man of men who could tell them all they should do. No truer American existed than Henry David Thoreau. His soul was made for the noblest society. He had, in a short life, exhausted the capabilities of this world. It seems an injury that he should leave in the midst of his broken task, which none else can finish. A kind of indignity to so noble a soul, but he, at least, is content. Wherever there is knowledge, wherever there is virtue, wherever there is beauty, Henry David Thoreau will find a home. Thank you.
A young lady who knew Henry when she was growing up as a child also has personal memories to share.
The time when Mr. Thoreau was our more intimate playfellow must have been when he was living at Walden and we were children. He used to come in at dusk as my brother and I sat on the rug before the dining room fire, and taking the great green rocking chair, he would tell us stories. He began with telling us the different houses he lived in and what he remembered about each. And sometimes he would play juggler tricks for us and swallow his knife and produce it from our ears or noses. We usually ran to bring him some apples as soon as he came in, and he often would cut one in halves and find points that scarcely could show in close examination, and then the joke was to ask Father to break it for us and see it fall into pieces in his hands. But perhaps the most charming evenings were those when he brought some ears of popcorn in his pocket. He would put them in the old brass warming pan and hold it out and shake it over the fire, till at last, as we listened, the rattling changed to popping, and when the popping became very brisk, he would hold the pan over the rug and lift the lid, and suddenly a beautiful fountain of white corn fell all over us. Sometimes, if he met us in the woods on Sunday, he will join us for a little way, and he made those few steps memorable by showing us many hidden wonders of the forest that we couldn't find ourselves, a rare tree, or some remarkable bird, or nest, or flower. When he found berries during his walks, he always remembered us. He came to arrange a huckleberrying for us, and he sat on a board placed across the front and drove and led the frolic with his jokes and laughter. As we jolted along while our parents followed us, I do not remember a check or a reproof from him, no matter how noisy we were. I remember one brilliant autumn afternoon when he took us in his boat to gather wild grapes overhanging the river, and we brought home a load of crimson and golden bows as well. In his last illness, it did not occur to us that he would care to see us, but his sister told my mother that he watched us from the window as he passed and said, "Why don't they come see me? I love them as if they were my own." After that, we went often, and he always made us so welcome that we liked to go. I remember our last meeting. It was as much pleasure as in the old play days. I remember you singing Tom Bowling to us and also playing your flute, but that was earlier. I will miss you, Mr. Thoreau.
On a summer afternoon in 1846, while living in the woods by Walden Pond, Thoreau was walking to town when he encountered Mr. Sam Staples, the Concord tax collector, constable, and jailer.
Good evening, Mr. Thoreau. Good evening. They say you've lived holed up in that forest by the pond and ain't never coming out. Well, I knew better. How long did you think you could hide from the government, Henry, and not pay your tax? 6 years? Henry, please.
Good evening, Mr. Staples. I know you have a job to do, but how does it become a man to behave toward this American government today? I answer that he cannot, without disgrace, be associated with it. I cannot for an instant recognize that political organization as my government, which is also the slaves' government.
Henry, I will pay your tax if you are so hard up.
No, thank you. And that is not all. Witness the present Mexican War, a war waged by this government to rob a weak neighbor and enrich the slaveholder.
So what are you going to do?
For my part, I'm going to grow just enough corn and beans to keep me from starving and finish them before the government comes and takes them.
Well, so what am I to do then?
You can resign your post.
Henry, if you don't pay, I will have to lock you up pretty soon.
As well now, Sam, as any other time.
Well, come along then. Come on, boys. Time to lock up.
Thoreau spent that night behind bars in the Concord jail. Early the next morning, Ralph Waldo Emerson visited him in his cell.
Good morning, Henry. What are you doing in there?
Good morning, Waldo. What are you doing out there?
Henry, Concord was tossing and turning all night on your accord.
Sorry to hear that, but I had the best night's sleep in a long time. This is by far the best kept inn in town. I did not for a moment feel confined, and the walls seemed to me a great waste of stone and mortar. Indeed, I felt as if I alone of all my townsmen had paid my tax.
You always had your skulking maneuvers, Henry. But let me tell you, you might as well strike against that stone wall as fight the town hall.
Waldo, I cannot help being struck with the foolishness of that institution, which treats me as if I were mere flesh, blood, and bones to be locked up. I could not but smile to see how industriously they locked the door on my meditations, which followed them out again without let or hindrance. And my meditations were really all that was dangerous. As they could not reach me, they resolved to punish my body. Just as boys, if they cannot come at some person against whom they have a spite, will abuse his dog.
Are the jail folks treating you well?
They plainly did not know how to treat me, but behaved like persons who are underbred. In every threat and in every compliment, there was a blunder, for they thought that my chief desire was to stand on the other side of that stone wall. I saw that the state is half-witted, lost all my remaining respect for it, and pitied it.
A wall is still a wall, Henry. Wouldn't you rather be outside and walk as free as your townsmen?
No, to the contrary, Waldo. I see that if there is a stone wall between my townsmen and me, there is still a more difficult one to climb or break through before they could get to be as free as I am.
You make me very proud, Henry, but somehow I feel freer outside the jail.
Sam Staples, the jailer, also appeared at Thoreau's cell in the morning.
Good morning, Mr. Emerson. Good morning, Mr. Thoreau. Behold, the Concord School of Philosophy. I trust your breakfast wasn't too bad, Mr. Thoreau.
Not at all. Indeed, as my cellmate advised, I saved half a loaf for lunch.
Well, perhaps you need a box to take it home in. You are a free man, Mr. Thoreau. You may leave now.
What? That is not possible. I refuse to pay the tax, and I am in no rush to refuse the state's hospitality.
Well, I'm here to report that someone came and paid your tax last night. You ain't my prisoner no more.
But I do not approve it.
Well, Henry, if you don't leave on your own account, I will have you thrown out.
On January 26, 1848, Thoreau delivered a lecture entitled The Rights and Duties of the Individual in Relation to the Government. He did so at the Concord Lyceum. This essay, published in the journal Aesthetic Papers in 1849, was to become famous under the title Civil Disobedience. This essay influenced such revolutionaries as Mahatma Gandhi, Leo Tolstoy, and Martin Luther King Jr. This essay inspired struggles for independence and civil liberties by peaceful means around the world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I heartily accept the motto, that government is best which governs least. And I should like to see it acted up to more rapidly and systematically. This American government, what is it but a tradition, though a recent one, endeavoring to transmit itself unimpaired to posterity, but each instant losing some of its integrity. It has not the vitality and force of a single living man, for a single man can bend it to his will. Must the citizen ever for a moment, or in the least degree, resign his conscience to the legislator? Then why has every man a conscience? I think that we should be men first and subjects afterward. A common and natural result of an undue respect for law is that you may see a file of soldiers, colonel, captain, corporal, privates, powder monkeys, and all, marching in admirable order over hill and dale to the wars against their will, aye, against their common sense and consciences, which makes it very steep marching indeed. Unjust laws exist. If the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine of government, let it go. Let it go. Perchance it will wear smooth. Certainly the machine will wear out. But if it is of such a nature that it requires you to be the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Let your life be a counter friction to stop the machine. If I have unjustly wrested a plank from a drowning man, I must restore it to him, though I drown myself. This would be inconvenient, but he that would save his life in such a case shall lose it. Under a government which imprisons any unjustly, the true place for a just man is also a prison. When the subject has refused allegiance and the officer has resigned his office, then the revolution is accomplished. That is, in fact, the definition of a peaceable revolution, if any such is possible. If a plant cannot live according to its nature, it dies, and so a man. I please myself with imagining a state, at least which can afford to be just to all men, and to treat the individual with respect as a neighbor. And I would not think it inconsistent with its own repose if a few were to live aloof from it, not meddling with it, nor embraced by it, but simply fulfilling all the duties of neighbors and fellow men. A state which bore this kind of fruit and suffered it to drop off as fast as it ripened would prepare the way for a still more perfect and glorious state, which also I have imagined, but not yet seen anywhere. Thank you.
Beginning July 4th, 1845, for over 2 years, Henry David Thoreau lived in a cabin that he built with his own hands in the woods by Walden Pond at a total cost of $28.12.5. His observations from this period were published in the book Walden in 1854. Let us listen now to selected passages from the chapter Economy.
I should not talk so much about myself if there were anyone else I knew as well. Unfortunately, I am confined to this theme by the narrowness of my experience. I would also fain say something about your condition, especially your outward condition, or circumstances in this world, in this town, what it is, whether it is necessary that it be as bad as it is, whether it cannot be improved as well as not. I see young men, my townsmen, whose misfortune it is to have inherited farms, houses, barns, cattle, and farming tools. For these are more easily acquired than got rid of. Who made them the serfs of the soil? Why should they eat their 60 acres when man is condemned to eat only his peck of dirt? Think also of the ladies of the land weaving toilet cushions against the last day, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity.
But men labor under a mistake. By seeming fate, commonly called necessity, they are employed, as it says in an old book, laying up treasures which moth and rust will corrupt and thieves break in and steal. It is a fool's life, as they will find when they get to the end of it, if not before. The finest qualities of our nature, like the bloom on fruits, can be preserved only by the most delicate handling. Yet we do not treat ourselves nor one another thus tenderly. There are so many keen and subtle masters that enslave both North and South. It is hard to have a Southern overseer. It is worse to have a Northern one. But worst of all, when you are the slave driver of yourself. Public opinion is a weak tyrant compared with our own private opinion. What a man thinks of himself, that it is which determines, or rather indicates, his fate.
The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after work. But it is characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things.
Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only not indispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind. The wisest have ever lived a more simple and meager life than the poor. Nations are possessed with an insane ambition to perpetuate the memory of themselves by the amount of hammered stone they leave. What if equal pains were taken to smooth and polish their manners? Most of the stone a nation hammers goes toward its tomb only. It should not be by their architecture, but why not even by their power of abstract thought that nations should seek to commemorate themselves. How much more admirable the Bhagavad Gita than all the ruins of the East.
And now a few excerpts from the chapter Where I Lived and What I Lived For.
I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. I got up early and bathed in the pond. That was a religious exercise. The Vedas say all intelligences awake with the morning. Poetry and art, and the fairest and most memorable of the actions of men, date from such an hour. Morning is when I am awake and there is a dawn in me. Moral reform is the effort to throw off sleep. The millions are awake enough for physical labor, but only 1 in a million is awake enough for effective intellectual exertion. Only 1 in 100 million to a poetic or divine life. To be awake is to be alive. I have never yet met a man who was quite awake. How could I have looked him in the face?
Our life is frittered away by detail. An honest man has hardly need to count more than his 10 fingers, or in extreme cases, he may add his 10 toes and then lump the rest. Simplicity, simplicity, simplicity. I say, let your affairs be 2 or 3, and not 100 or 1,000. Instead of 1,000,000, count half a dozen, and keep your accounts on your thumbnail. Simplify, simplify. Instead of 3 meals a day, if it be necessary, eat but 1. Instead of 100 dishes, 5. And reduce other things in proportion.
Time is but the stream I go a-fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink, I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I would drink deeper, fish in the sky, whose bottom is pebbly with stars. I cannot count 1. I know not the first letter of the alphabet. I have always been regretting that I was not as wise as the day I was born.
And here is a sample of his allegory, imagery, and satire from the chapter Brute Neighbors.
One day, when I went out to my wood pile, or rather my pile of stumps, I observed 2 large ants, the one red, the other much larger, nearly half an inch long and black, fiercely contending with one another. Having once got a hold, they never let go, but struggled and wrestled and rolled on the chips incessantly. Looking farther, I was surprised to find that the chips were covered with such combatants, that it was not a duellum, but a bellum, a war between 2 races of ants. The red always pitted against the black, and frequently 2 red ones to 1 black. The legions of these myrmidons covered all the hills and vales of my woodpile. Yet the Republicans on the one hand and the black imperialists on the other. And the ground was already strewn with dead and dying, both red and black. Human soldiers never fought so resolutely. I watched a couple that were fast locked in each other's embraces in a little sunny valley amid the chips. Now at noonday, prepared to fight till the sun went down or life went out. Neither manifested the least disposition to retreat. It was evident that their battle cry was conquer or die. In the meanwhile, there came along a single red ant on the hillside of this valley, evidently full of excitement, who had not yet taken part in the battle so far, for he had lost none of his limbs, whose mother had charged him to return with his shield or upon it. He saw this unequal combat from afar. The blacks were nearly twice the size of the red, and he drew near with rapid pace till he stood on his guard within half an inch of the combatants. And then, watching his opportunity, he sprang upon the black warrior and commenced his operations near the root of his right foreleg, leaving the foe to select among his members. And so there were three united for life, as if a new kind of attraction had been invented which put all other locks and cements to shame. I should not have wondered by this time to find that they had their respective musical bands stationed on some eminent chip and playing their national airs the while to excite the slow and cheer the dying combatants. I was myself excited somewhat, even as if they had been men. And the more you think about it, the less the difference. Concord fight, 2 killed on the Patriot side, and Luther Blanchard wounded. Fire, for God's sakes, fire! I have no doubt that it was a principle they fought for, as much as our ancestors, and not to avoid a 3-penny tax on their tea. A similar engagement between great and small ants is recorded in Olus Magnus, in which the small ones, being victorious, are said to have buried the bodies of their own soldiers, but left those of their giant enemies as a prey for the birds. This event happened previous to the expulsion of the tyrant Christian II from Sweden. The battle which I witnessed took place in the presidency of Polk 5 years before the passage of Webster's Fugitive Slave Bill.
Thoreau earned his living mostly by the labor of his hands. Besides being a surveyor, he was a live-in handyman, housekeeper, family friend, and for a while, a tutor of the children at Emerson's house. Fireside conversations in Emerson's parlor must have been as warming as their walks in the woods.
Good job with the superior pencils you have made, Henry. Congratulations. Now you have opened your way to fortune.
Thank you, Waldo. But why should I make another pencil? I would not do again what I have done once. Something that is done well is done forever.
Noble thinking, Henry. But I don't know if that will put food on the table.
Plus, a superior pencil doesn't promise superior literature. Matter of fact, I should try my hands on making some plain paper. I cannot easily buy a blank book to write my thoughts in. They are commonly ruled for dollars and cents.
You are right, alas. There is no American poetry. But here, Griswold says there is.
You mean the editor of Graham's magazine?
Correct. He replaced Poe. And that's not beside the point. What Griswold calls American poetry is his merchandise. He keeps its shop.
I had found a poet in the woods.
Had you? What did he look like?
It had feathers and had not been to Harvard College. Still, it had a voice and an aerial inclination, which was pretty much all that was needed.
Let us cage it.
That is just the way the world always spoils its poets.
Thoreau's descriptions and reflections on the plants and birds of New England that he recorded over 150 years ago remain unparalleled in detail, beauty, poetry, and imagination to this day. Autumnal Tints, published in the Atlantic Monthly in October 1862, is a feast to the senses and a guide to the naturalist.
The autumnal change of our woods has not made a deep impression on our own literature yet. October has hardly tinged our poetry. Most appear to confound changed leaves with withered ones, as if they were to confound ripe apples with rotten ones. Generally, every fruit on ripening, and just before it falls, when it commences a more independent and individual existence, requiring less nourishment from any source, acquires a bright tint. So do leaves. The physiologist says it is due to an increased absorption of oxygen. That is the scientific account of the matter, only a reassertion of the fact. But I am more interested in the rosy cheek than I am to know what particular diet the maiden fed on. The very forest and herbage, the pellicle of the earth, must acquire a bright color, an evidence of its ripeness, as if the globe itself were a fruit on its stem, with ever a cheek toward the sun. Flowers are but colored leaves, fruits but ripe ones. October is the month of painted leaves. Their rich glow now flashes round the world, as fruits and leaves and the day itself acquire a bright tint just before they fall. So the year near its setting. October is its sunset sky, November the later twilight.
The purple grass is now in the height of its beauty. I remember still when I first noticed this grass particularly. Standing on a hillside near a river, I saw, 30 or 40 rods off, a stripe of purple, like a berry stain laid on close and thick. Half a dozen rods long, under the edge of a wood, where the ground sloped toward the meadow. On going to and examining it, I found it to be a kind of grass in bloom, hardly a foot high, with but few green blades, in a fine spreading panicle of purple flowers, a shallow purplish mist trembling around me. If you plucked a single plant, you were surprised to find out how thin it was and how little color it had. But viewed at a distance in a favorable light, it was a fine, lively purple flower-like, enriching the earth. Such puny causes combined to produce these decided effects. The finest patches of it grow on waste strips or selvages of land at the base of dry hills, just above the edge of the meadows, where the greedy mower does not feign to swing his scythe, for this is a thin and poor grass beneath his notice. He carefully gets the meadow hay and more nutritious grasses which grow next to that, but he leaves this fine purple mist for the walker's harvest, fodder for his fancy stock. Nature thus keeps use and beauty distinct.
The poke, or garget. We love to see any redness in the vegetation of the temperate zone. It is the color of colors. This plant speaks to our blood. It asks a bright sun on it to make it show to best advantage, and it must be seen at this season of the year. It appears a rare triumph of nature to have produced and perfected such a plant, as if this were enough for a summer. What a perfect maturity it arrives at. It is the emblem of a successful life, concluded by a death not premature, which is an ornament to nature. What if we were to mature as perfectly, root and branch, glowing in the midst of our decay, like the poke? I confess that it excites me to behold them. I cut one for a cane, for I would fain handle and lean on it. I love to press the berries between my fingers and see their juice staining my hand. To walk amid these upright branching casks of purple wine, which retain and diffuse a sunset glow, tasting each one with our eye, instead of counting the pipes on a London dock. What a privilege! For nature's vintage is not confined to the vine. Here are berries enough to paint afresh the western sky and play the bacchanal with, if you will. And what flutes its ensanguined stems would make to be used in such a dance.
The chestnut beard grass, or Indian grass, growing here and there in waste places, is still handsomer and of more vivid colors than its congeners, and might well have caught the Indian's eye. It has a long, narrow, one-sided, slightly nodding panicle of bright purple and yellow flowers, like a banner raised above its reedy leaves. These bright standards are now advanced on the distant hillsides, not in large armies, but in scattered troops or single file, like the red men. They stand thus fair and bright, representative of the race which they are named after, but for the most part, unobserved as they. The expression of this grass haunted me for a week after I first passed and noticed it, like the glance of an eye. It stands like an Indian chief taking a long last look at his favorite hunting grounds.
But I walk encouraged between the tufts of purple wood grass, over the sandy fields and along the edge of the shrub oaks, glad to recognize these simple contemporaries. With thoughts cutting a broad swath, I get them. With horse-raking thoughts, I gather them into windrows. The fine-eared poet may hear the whetting of my scythe. Wherever I walk these afternoons, the purple-fingered grass also stands like a guideboard and points my thoughts to more poetic paths than they have lately traveled. A man shall perhaps rush by and trample down plants as high as his head and cannot be said to know that they exist, though he may have cut many tons of them, littered his stables with them, and fed them to his cattle for years. Yet if he ever favorably attends to them, he may be overcome by their beauty. Each humblest plant, or weed as we call it, stands there to express some thought or mood of ours, and yet how lone it stands in vain. I had walked over those great fields so many Augusts, and never yet distinctly recognized these purple companions that I had there. I had brushed against them and trodden on them, forsooth, and now, at last they, as it were, rose up and blessed me. Beauty and true wealth are always thus cheap and despised. Heaven might be defined as the place which men avoid.
Henry David Thoreau seldom traveled outside of New England and never crossed any ocean. He walked, hiked, and paddled as far as his legs and arms would carry him. And he said, "There are no larger fields than these, no worthier games than may here be played." His essay, Walking, that he delivered several times during his lifetime, was published in the Atlantic Monthly soon after his death.
When sometimes I'm reminded that the mechanics and shopkeepers stay in their shops not all the forenoon, but all the afternoon too, sitting with crossed legs, as if the legs were made to sit upon and not to stand upon or walk upon, I think that they deserve some credit for not having committed suicide long ago.
No wealth can buy the requisite leisure, freedom, and independence which are the capital in this profession. It comes only by the grace of God. It requires a direct dispensation from heaven to become a walker. But the walking of which I speak has nothing in it akin to taking exercise, as it is called, as the sick take medicine at stated hours. If you would get exercise, go in search of the springs of life.
As a true patriot, I should be ashamed to think that Adam in paradise was more favorably suited than the backwoodsmen in this country. A town is saved not more by the righteous men in it than by the woods and swamps that surround it. A township where one primitive forest waves above while another primitive forest rots below, such town is fitted to raise not only corn and potatoes, but poets and philosophers for the coming ages. In such a soil grew Homer and Confucius and the rest, and out of such a wilderness comes the reformer eating locusts and wild honey. In short, all good things are wild and free.
Any sportiveness in cattle is unexpected. I saw one day a herd of a dozen bullocks and cows running about and frisking in unwieldy sport, like huge rats, even like kittens. They shook their heads, raised their tails, and rushed up and down a hill. And I perceived by their horns, as well as by their activity, their relation to the deer tribe. But alas, a sudden loud whoa would have dampened their ardor at once and reduced them from venison to beef and stiffened their sides and sinews like the locomotive. Who but the evil one has cried whoa to mankind?
The essay, What Shall It Profit?, that he first delivered in 1854, was later published under the title Life Without Principle, published in the Atlantic Monthly in 1863. It became Thoreau's manifesto on how to live an honest life in harmony with society and nature.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the time is short, I will leave out all the flattery and retain all the criticism. The ways in which most men get their living, that is, live, are mere makeshifts and a shirking of the real business of life. The rush to California, for instance, and the attitude, not merely of merchants, but of philosophers and prophets in relation to it, reflect the greatest disgrace on mankind. I know of no more startling development in the immorality of trade. The hog that gets its living by rooting, stirring up the soil, would be ashamed of such company. Did God direct us so to get our living digging where we never planted? And would he perchance reward us with lumps of gold? Here's some of the names of the places where they dig. Jackass Flat, Sheep's Head Gully, Murderer's Bar, etc. Is there no satire in these names? Let them carry their ill-gotten wealth where they will. I am thinking it will still be Jackass Flat, if not Murderer's Bar, where they live. When we want culture more than potatoes and illumination more than sugar plums, then the result, or staple production, is not slaves nor operatives, but men, those rare fruits called heroes, saints, poets, philosophers, and redeemers. Thank you.
The Fugitive Slave Law of 1850 brought the anti-slavery sentiments of Henry David Thoreau to the forefront. Mr. Anthony Burns, an escaped slave living in Massachusetts, was captured and was awaiting the verdict of a Boston court. The judge was to decide whether Mr. Burns was his owner's property to be returned to slavery. On Independence Day, 1854, Henry David Thoreau would speak before an anti-slavery rally in Framingham, Massachusetts. This speech will later be published under the title Slavery in Massachusetts.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The whole military force of the state of Massachusetts, as I speak tonight, is at the service of a slaveholder from Virginia to enable him to catch a man whom he calls his property. But not a single soldier is offered to save a citizen of Massachusetts from being kidnapped. It is really the trial of Massachusetts. Every moment that she hesitates to set this man free, every moment that she now hesitates to atone for her crime, she is convicted. The commissioner on her case is God. Not Edward G. God, but simply God. I wish my countrymen to consider that whatever the human law may be, neither an individual nor a nation can ever commit the least act of injustice against the obscurest individual without having to pay the penalty for it. I would remind my countrymen that they are to be men first and Americans only at a late and convenient hour. Let the state dissolve her union with the slaveholder. Let each inhabitant of the state dissolve his union with her, as long as she delays to do her duty. Show me a free state and a court truly of justice, and I will fight for them if need be. But show me Massachusetts, and I refuse her my allegiance and express contempt for her courts. I have lived for the last month with a sense of having suffered a vast and indefinite loss. I did not know at first what ailed me. At last it occurred to me that what I had lost was a country. The remembrance of my country spoils my walk. My thoughts are murder to the state and involuntarily go plotting against her. But it chanced the other day that I scented a white water lily, and a season I had waited for had arrived. That water lily is the emblem of purity. It bursts up so pure and fair to the eye and so sweet to the scent, as if to show us what purity and sweetness reside in and can be extracted from the slime and muck of the earth. What confirmation of our hopes is in the fragrance of this flower. If nature can compound this fragrance annually, I shall believe her still young and full of vigor, her integrity and genius unimpaired, and that there is virtue even in man too, who is fitted to perceive and love it. It reminds me that nature has been partner to no Missouri Compromise. I scent no compromise in the fragrance of the water lily. In it, the sweet and pure and innocent are wholly sundered from the obscene and baleful. So behave, that the odor of your actions may enhance the general sweetness of the atmosphere. Slavery and servility have produced no sweet-scented flower annually to charm the senses of men, for they have no real life. They are merely a decaying and a death, offensive to all healthy nostrils. We do not complain that they live, but that they do not get buried. Let the living bury them. Even they are good for manure.
While these events were unfolding, Henry David Thoreau could not go to sleep. He kept paper under his pillow and wrote in the dark. Before the first friendly word was spoken for Captain John Brown, Thoreau announced his intention to speak publicly on the condition and character of John Brown and his men. On October 30th, the town hall was filled at an early hour. When the select men refused to ring the town bell to announce his speech, Thoreau rang it himself.
I trust that you will pardon me for being here. I do not wish to force my thoughts upon you, but I feel forced myself. Ladies and gentlemen, it costs us nothing to be just. The man this country is about to hang is the greatest and best in it. I hear one ask, Yankee-like, what will John Brown gain by his act? No doubt, you can get more in your market for a quart of milk than for a quart of blood. But that is not the market that heroes carry their blood to. Most cannot conceive of a man who is actuated by higher motives than they are. Accordingly, they pronounce this man insane. Insane? A father and 6 sons, and 1 son-in-law, and several more men besides, at least as many as 12 disciples, all struck with insanity at once? Meanwhile, the same tyrant holds, with a firmer grip than ever, his 4 millions of slaves and 1,000 so-called sane editors, his abettors, are saving their country and their bacon. Treason? Where does such treason take its rise? Can you dry up the fountains of thought? When you have caught and hung all these human rebels, you have accomplished nothing but your own guilt, for you have not struck at the fountainhead. I hear many men condemn these men because they were so few. When were the good and brave ever in a majority? Captain Brown could not have been tried by a jury of his peers because his peers did not exist. I regard this event as a touchstone designed to bring out with glaring distinctness the character of this government. The only government that I recognize is that power that establishes justice in the land, never that which establishes injustice. Think of him. A man such as the sun may not rise upon again in this benighted land, to whose making went the costliest material, the finest adamant, sent to be the redeemer of those in captivity. And the only use to which you can put him is to hang him at the end of a rope. Any man knows when he is justified, and all the wits in the world cannot enlighten him on that point. Is it not possible that an individual may be right and a government wrong? When a government takes the life of a man without the consent of his conscience, it is an audacious government and is taking a step toward its own dissolution. When these things are being done, beauty stands veiled and music is a screeching lie. Some 1,800 years ago, Christ was crucified. A few weeks from now, perchance, Captain Brown will be hung. These are the 2 ends of a chain which is not without its links. I foresee the time when the painter will paint that scene no longer going to Rome for a subject. The poet will sing it. The historian will record it. And with the landing of the Pilgrims and the Declaration of Independence, it will be the ornament of some future national gallery, when at least the present form of slavery shall be no more in this land. We shall then be at liberty to weep for Captain Brown. Then, and not till then, we will take our revenge.
The words of Thoreau proved as prophetic as the last written words of Captain John Brown. Not too long after, Union soldiers were marching across Virginia to the tune of the Marshall Song.
John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the ground. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the ground. John Brown's body lies a-mouldering in the ground. His soul is marching on. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His soul goes marching on.
And in less than 2 years, at the news of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, there was a celebration at Concord. They called it the John Brown Party. But alas, Henry David Thoreau was not to be at this party. By then, his body also laid a moldering in the ground. But his words spring forth. His voice resonates. His relevance grows even after the turn of 2 centuries and the dawn of a new millennium. Neither a professor of botany nor a professional naturalist, Henry David Thoreau taught himself and wrote about ecology, phenology, limnology, dendrochronology, all at a time when these terms did not even exist. All the speeches and writings on environmental protection, climate change, and the like by pundits who came after him hardly amount in force, directness, and simplicity to one sentence in 8 words by Henry David Thoreau. In wildness is the preservation of the world.